Hello. In this video, we will define a diversity management. We will look at diversity management levels and approaches. And finally, we will analyze a little bit more in depth what each of us as individuals can do when managing diversity. So first of all, let's define diversity. Diversity management is a practice of addressing and supporting multiple lifestyles and personal characteristics within a defined group. I put supporting in brackets because there are different ways to address diversity management and they have different levels of supportiveness. Nevertheless, basic idea of diversity management is being able to gather these different colors to one comprehensive working system and make it move towards the goal that was set, just like the colorful moving elephant in the picture. We can say that diversity management is a part of sustainability initiatives in the organization. However, depending on the rationale to engage in diversity management, the goals and actions might be entirely different. There are two different rationales to engage in diversity management. The need to maintain economic sustainability leads to so to say business case. It is a need to avoid something like lawsuits, reduce costly employee turnover, improve teamwork efficiency, tap into broader customer base, increase team innovation and output, and things like that. The need to maintain social sustainability leads to so-called social justice case, meaning that these are attempts to provide equal opportunity for everyone, provide equal pay based on merits, reduce discrimination, ensure rights of minorities, and alike. Both rationales are likely to support each other, but company must be always very clear what is their motive to engage in diversity management initiatives. Once we know the motives behind, it allows us building evaluation system, whether initiatives have been achieved or not, and also then we will know what kind of measures we need to use, because measures will be different too. For example, in business case, we may measure things such as turnover rate, amount of innovations produced, amount of lawsuits after the organization engaged in diversity management initiatives. While working on a social justice case, we may be measuring organizational climate for justice. So measures, as you can see, are really different, and that's why we have to be really clear about what is the rationale of our organization engaging in diversity management. Now, regardless of which case for diversity we decide to pursue, diversity can be managed at several levels. So each level requires different actions and tools, the same logic. If at organizational level, we may have general diversity management strategies or policies. At team level, we need to manage culture and the processes of interaction between the members in the team, group, unit, or subsidiary. Finally, at individual level, we need to handle individual attitudes, behaviors, perceptions, and the like. All three levels are interconnected because, for example, organizational policy may define what kind of attitudes and behaviors within organization individuals are expected to develop and how organization expects its diverse team to be working. And basically, there are 4 different ways to approach diversity management, and they're applicable to all 3 levels that we have just discussed in a moment, because there might be initiatives done at the organizational level that are enacted differently at the team level and perceived differently at the individual level. So, for example, even if organization has diversity management policy, it's not actively applied in team operations, for example, or it may be actively applied, but let's say it's not. So individuals within the team perceive that their organization is not very active in diversity management. So you can see that 3 levels interact and they the things at 3 levels might be very different. So the 4 approaches in the slide reveal the level of supportiveness for diversity management. And if we wish to measure the level of supportiveness, we should look at the level of belongingness. It is to what extent the environment and individuals within it create a feeling that I belong to this organization, as well as to what extent my uniqueness is valid in the organization. So when we look at how the two measures interact, we get 4 different approaches: exclusion, assimilation, differentiation, and inclusion. Exclusion, that is a situation when someone is rejected by co-workers and supervisors. In this situation, knowledge, capabilities, perspectives of a person with certain dimension of diversity are not recognized by other organizational members, and therefore person experiences exclusion. For example, woman manager among top management team is not recognized or valued by her capabilities, and therefore she feels excluded. Or person with different skin color is excluded from the team. Assimilation is the situation when individual is expected to conform the norm in order to be accepted. For example, individual uniqueness may be considered as stigma, meaning, for example, being a gay or being a certain religion or having some disability. In this situation, individuals are likely to hide their distinctive features and to avoid being stigmatized. The other response to this situation might be that individuals attempt to downplay their differences. So, for example, women engineers or lawyers might be adapting more masculine behavior in order to fit male-dominated work environment. So this situation will ensure that individuals satisfy his or her feeling of belongingness, right, and belongingness needs, and will become a part of the group, but will lose own uniqueness or part of personal values because they will have to downplay it or sort of hide it in order to not to be rejected. The other approach is differentiation, and that is the situation where employee differences are acknowledged but considered as an asset, but the individual is considered an outsider. For example, minority employees are considered to be an asset to reach a particular customer group, but they are perceived to be outsiders who are in the organization only for this purpose, because the rest of the people form the majority. Inclusion, on the other hand, differs from differentiation approach by one specific aspect. Inclusion recognizes the diversity of individuals and values their uniqueness, but simultaneously, it considers individuals as a part of the whole group or insider of the organization. So let's consider the same example we discussed in the differentiation approach in the context of inclusion. Employees are considered as minority and valued for their ability to tap into a specific customer group, but also they are considered as a part of the organization and diverse organizational culture. So, inclusive organization can be defined as one in which diversity of perspectives that members of different groups bring to the organization has shaped its strategy, its management and operating systems, and its core values and norms to reach the success. Now, how we can support inclusion in the workplace, because it's really beneficial and it allows utilizing individual uniqueness for economic gains while creating positive work environment. At the organizational level, now we again go through the levels as you remember, the focus could be on creating inclusiveness climate, and this could be done by, for example, fair employment practices or interpersonal integration of diverse employees, diverse group involvement in decision making, or openly addressing diversity and diversity-related conflicts at the organizational level. Inclusive leadership is also very important. So, for example, team or organizational leaders could facilitate inclusiveness by personally showing appreciation for others' contributions and inviting group members to provide input. Fair standards and clear evaluation process equally applied by leader to all team members is another individual level behavior that is likely to support inclusion. Now, people don't leave workplace, they leave their bosses. That is why individual behavior of leaders are extremely important, and we will discuss in this lecture further some practices that could help to be a better leader, manager, or colleague. So now let's look at how leaders and every individual in the organization could support inclusion and enhance respect for differences. So first of all, it could be done by acknowledging diversity and its importance and its complexity. Organizational members should learn recognizing how different diversity dimensions interact and what patterns in thinking, feeling, and evaluation each dimension brings, as we discussed these aspects in the first video lecture. This is also, it is important to sense the diversity as much as we can and via direct encounters or experiences of others or visual or sensual material like videos. For example, video clips are really beneficial because we can engage in emotions and feelings of others very nicely through video material. Now, another aspect that can be done is by acknowledging unconscious biases. Basically, each of us have unconscious biases, and each individual in an organization brings with them a diverse set of perspectives, work and life experiences, as well as religious and cultural differences. The power of diversity can only be unleashed and its benefits reaped when we recognize these differences and learn to respect and value each individual irrelevant of their background. Thus, irrelevant can be achieved only when we acknowledge what are the differences and what are relevant consciously and unconsciously for each of us. Unconscious bias happens by our brain when our brains are making incredibly quick judgment and assessment of people and situations without us realizing. Our background, personal experiences, social stereotypes, and cultural context have an impact on our decisions and actions without us realizing that. So that is why we all have pre-assumptions and unconscious biases. It's just the way our brains function. Biggest problem arises not from having these biases, but from ignoring them. We all have them and we all must acknowledge them to deal effectively with diversity. So how to do that? We can start with observing our reactions to certain situations where we face diversity, and we could evaluate judgments that we have made. Once we are aware of our judgments about a specific case, we should make an effort to consider other possible options to evaluate the same situation. Comparing our initial judgments with alternatives will help us to tap into the roots of our biases and observe these unconscious biases more and more. Now, the other aspect really important is stereotypes. Stereotype is a widely held but fixed and oversimplified image or idea of a particular type of a person or a thing. And stereotype is already a conscious bias. So this is how they are. That's all, they always do so, or nothing unexpected from these kind of people, and so on and so forth. So when we hear ourselves telling the similar thing, we're likely to talk about the stereotypes. Some stereotypes are very widely discussed. For example, we could even say that cultural dimensions that we discuss at the university is also sort of a stereotype. So how do we deal with stereotypes? Are stereotypes only a bad thing? No. Let's consider several examples. So stereotype number one. Let's say, let's name it, all Finnish people tend to be conflict avoidant. Once identifying that we are dealing with stereotype, we should evaluate what emotional load this stereotype has. In this case, that all Finnish people tend to avoid conflict, emotional load seems to be positive. Thus, we ask, can this stereotype be useful? Yes, it can. It may prevent us from problems while communicating with Finnish nationals. So we do apply this stereotype while interacting with Finnish nationals. However, by simultaneously observing what is actually happening. Feedback should be utilized at once. And in this example, we observe that our Finnish members may really be conflict avoidant. As a result, many problems are unstated and remain unsolved. Thus, we should invent methods according to each individual team or team. How could we address and solve existing problems? Some individual teams or individuals or teams will be more sensitive, some less. Thus, we'll have to judge on individual basis or the case how to handle the situation. In this case of sort of the situation when we have the positive emotional load, things should be clear. Now let's see the example if we have a negative emotional load. For example, if we consider a stereotype that all Russians are aggressive, well, obviously we do not apply this stereotype to practice. Instead, we acknowledge that such statement is a stereotype with a negative emotional load. And we take conscious decision to deal with every Russian national that we meet on an individual basis. And we keep reminding ourselves about our possible misjudgments about certain behavior due to the stereotype that we are having in our head. Then we utilize feedback and we adjust our understanding about each particular person when we interact. While managing diversity in teams, language plays a crucial role. English language is reinvented, invented in many ways depending on the background of the person. Things are not self-evident, although we seem to speak the same English. Even simply as things can be understood differently due to differences in educational background, culture, early experiences, values, age, and so on and so forth. Therefore, we should always inquire to clarify the terms within the team and agree on how our team defines one or the other term or expression. So that is really crucial while working in diverse teams. Finally, here is one more technique of learning to be in other person's shoes. It consists of 5 steps, meaning active listening or listening with no conclusions in advance, rewording what was just said to confirm that we got the point right, rethinking the meaning the other person has on the situation, summarizing the main points of other person's position, and matching the other person's understanding of the situation to the situation from our own environment. So let's consider the example to understand how this works. So let's say a team member who is originally from Mexico has informed the team leader that he is supposed to attend his daughter's 15th birthday or quinceañera. And that is why he's not able to attend an extremely important meeting with the customer, where his role is actually crucial. At this stage, we as a leader probably are mad that someone is missing such an important meeting for the sake of the birthday. But we try to be an inclusive manager, and we try sort of to clarify things first before reacting or engaging in this emotion, and before jumping to conclusions about this team member as a responsible employee. So therefore, we ask and actively listen. So the response that we hear is that this birthday in Latin America has extreme importance and is celebrated differently from any other as it marks the transition from childhood to young womanhood. And historically, that has been a significant occasion in a girl's life, and it's a huge celebration for the family. So we sort of, in discussion, we summarize, we rethink about the situation, and we summarize the points that employee has shared with us. And finally, we try to do the matching. For example, comparing with this event to, for example, baptizing of the child, some event that you can understand or relate as a significant in your family's life. And you would not like to miss such kind of event. Probably not. That is why, instead of judging the team member as responsible, we are now able to understand how important this family event is for him. And we try to discuss what kind of arrangements could be done so that the employee would not really miss this extremely important family event, and the work, of course, would be done. So that is it for this lecture. Thank you, and we'll meet again in further video lectures.